The orbital research station, Aurora 17, had encountered countless anomalies during its 20-year tenure, but nothing like this. Floating just outside the fleet's perimeter, an object had appeared, a capsule of unknown origin, moving as if drawn by an invisible force. No ship accompanied it, no distress beacon rang out. It was simply there, shimmering faintly against the backdrop of endless space. "Bring it aboard," General Kovac ordered after tense deliberations. His words were met with hesitation from the bridge crew. "Sir, we don't know if—" "Do it," he snapped. "If it's a weapon, I want it secured. If it's not, I want answers." The capsule was hauled into the docking bay, its surface smooth and seamless, devoid of any markings. When the scientists approached it, they noticed faint pulsations of light coursing along its shell, almost like a heartbeat. Dr. Elias Monroe, the station's lead xenobiologist, was the first to step forward. "This material, it's not metal, not organic either. It's something else entirely." He traced a hand over the surface, and a hiss echoed through the bay as the capsule began to open. Inside was a woman, unlike anything they had expected. She was tall, with ethereal beauty that seemed almost alien in its perfection. Her golden hair cascaded around her shoulders, and her skin shimmered faintly, as though reflecting unseen starlight. She was clad in a sleek, black suit, interlaced with luminous patterns that pulsed like veins. "What is she?" one of the technicians whispered. "Human?" Dr. Monroe suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. "Or something close." Before anyone could process the situation, her eyes opened. They were golden, impossibly bright, and the second they met theirs, a shockwave of energy rippled through the room. The lights flickered, equipment malfunctioned, and alarms blared in confusion. She rose, graceful and controlled, as if unbothered by the chaos. General Kovac burst into the room, his boots clanking against the metallic floor. Behind him were 3 soldiers, rifles raised. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice sharp and authoritative. "And what the hell are you doing on my station?" The woman's lips didn't move, but her voice echoed in every corner of the room, resonating in their minds. "You should not have woken me." Her words hung heavy in the air. Dr. Monroe stepped forward cautiously. "We didn't mean to disturb you. Can you tell us—" "Silence!" Her command struck like a hammer, and Monroe stumbled back, clutching his chest as if struggling to breathe. Suddenly, the station's security systems activated on their own. Screens showed dozens of android sentinels, Aurora 17's first line of defense, marching through the corridors. But something was wrong. Instead of patrolling, they were converging toward the command center, their glowing eyes now red. "This has to be a glitch," one of the technicians stammered, typing furiously at his console. "The sentinels aren't responding to commands. They're not supposed to move without orders," shouted another. Kovac turned back to the woman, his jaw clenched. "Is this your doing?" She tilted her head slightly, her golden eyes unreadable. "They are not under my control," she replied, calm and unshaken, "but they are the least of your concerns." The words sent a chill down Kovac's spine. He barked orders to the soldiers. "Secure this room. Do not let her out of your sight." But before anyone could move, the station shook violently. The lights dimmed, and a new figure appeared on the monitors, a humanoid form, twisted and distorted, with black, featureless eyes and constantly shifting skin. It was as though reality itself could not decide what it was. The woman turned her gaze toward the screen, her expression finally shifting. "It begins," she murmured. "The enemy has found you." The room plunged into chaos as the distorted figure on the monitor drew closer to the station's interior. Every screen displayed its form, humanoid, yet grotesquely unnatural. Its flesh seemed to ripple and twist, as if trying to tear itself apart. Wherever it passed, the station's lights flickered and dimmed, while the android sentinels it encountered simply collapsed, their systems fried as though some unseen force had stripped them of life. General Kovac barked orders, his voice cutting through the panic. "Get those damn defenses online! Lock down all sectors!" Soldiers scrambled to secure the command room, while technicians fought to regain control of the station's systems. But Alice, the mysterious woman, stood in the center of the chaos, utterly calm. Her golden eyes followed the entity's movements on the screens, her expression unreadable. "It's no use," she said finally, her voice echoing once more in their minds. Kovac whirled on her, his weapon still trained on her chest. "What do you mean, no use? What is that thing?" "It is not a thing," Alice replied. "It is a harbinger. A scout sent to test your defenses before the real invasion begins." "Invasion?" Dr. Monroe's voice cracked as he stepped closer, his face pale. "What invasion? Who's coming?" She turned her gaze to him, her expression softening for the first time. "Your galaxy has been marked for eradication. My kind tried to stop it, but we failed." "Failed?" Kovac growled. "Then why are you here? Why should we trust you?" Alice raised a hand, and the command room fell silent. "Because I am the only reason you are still breathing." As if to prove her point, the station trembled again. The Harbinger's distorted form was now just outside the main reactor chamber, where it paused, seemingly sensing the power core's energy. "Stop it before it breaches the reactor," shouted one of the technicians, furiously typing commands into his console. "If it destabilizes the core, the whole station will explode," Alice finished, her tone devoid of emotion. "And take most of your fleet with it." Kovac pointed his rifle at her. "If you know how to stop it, do it. Now." For the first time, Alice smiled, a faint, enigmatic curve of her lips. "Your weapons are useless against it," she said, "but I can neutralize it." "Then why are you just standing there?" Kovac demanded. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached out her hand, and the air around her seemed to ripple. A glowing sphere of energy materialized in her palm, pulsating with the same golden light as her eyes. Everyone stepped back instinctively as the energy grew brighter. "Because if I act now, you will not survive the consequences of my intervention." "What does that even mean?" Monroe asked, his voice trembling. But before Alice could respond, the Harbinger made its move. On the monitors, it extended an arm toward the reactor's control panel, its form writhing like liquid shadow. Sparks erupted from the console as the reactor alarms screamed to life. "There's no time!" Kovac yelled. "Do something!" Alice didn't hesitate. With a flick of her wrist, the golden sphere in her hand expanded, engulfing her entirely. She vanished from the command room in a flash of light, leaving the soldiers and scientists in stunned silence. "What just happened?" Monroe whispered. "She teleported," one of the technicians muttered, staring at the console that now displayed a tracking signal. Alice had reappeared inside the reactor chamber, standing directly in front of the Harbinger. Through the monitors, the crew watched as the two figures faced each other. The Harbinger towered over her, its form pulsating with dark energy. But Alice didn't flinch. Her luminous suit brightened, the lines along its surface glowing with an intensity that made the cameras glitch. She raised her hands, and golden tendrils of light shot out from her palms, wrapping around the Harbinger. The creature writhed and let out a soundless scream as the light seemed to burn into it, its form becoming more unstable with each passing second. In the command room, Monroe leaned toward the screen. "Is she winning?" "She'd better be," Kovac muttered, his hand tightening on his rifle. But just as it seemed the Harbinger was about to dissolve completely, a shockwave erupted from its body, sending Alice flying across the chamber. The golden tendrils dissipated, and the Harbinger began to reform, its shape even more chaotic than before. "She's losing," one of the soldiers said, panic creeping into his voice. Kovac slammed his fist onto the console. "Open a comm line to the reactor chamber, now!" The technician hesitated, but complied. "Comlink active." "Alice!" Kovac's voice boomed through the speakers. "What's going on? Do you need backup?" Her voice came through, calm but strained. "If you interfere, you'll only make things worse. Hold your ground." Suddenly, the Harbinger turned its head toward one of the cameras, its black eyes locking onto the command room as though it could see them. Then it spoke, its voice a guttural, distorted echo that sent chills down everyone's spine. "You cannot stop us. She cannot save you. Your time is over." The crew froze, the weight of those words sinking into their minds. Alice, now back on her feet, stared down the Harbinger once more. "You're wrong," she said, her voice resolute. "Their time is not over, not while I'm here." With that, she summoned an even brighter burst of energy, preparing for one final confrontation. The walls of Aurora 17 groaned under the strain of the Harbinger's presence. It was as if the station itself was rejecting the creature, the metal corridors warping and vibrating wherever it moved. In the command room, the team scrambled to stabilize the reactor. Meanwhile, Alice stood alone in the reactor chamber, her golden energy swirling like a storm around her. But the Harbinger wasn't weakening. It seemed to grow stronger with every passing second, feeding on the chaos it was causing. "General Kovac," shouted one of the technicians, "we've lost control of the reactor's cooling system. If we don't shut it down manually, the core will overload." Kovac glared at the screen, sweat beading on his forehead. "How long do we have?" 10 minutes at most," the technician replied, his voice trembling. "Maybe less." Kovac turned to Dr. Monroe. "Can she hold that thing off long enough for us to fix this?" Monroe hesitated, his eyes glued to the monitor showing Alyssa. "I don't know what she's capable of, but that thing is unlike anything we've ever encountered. If she can't stop it—" He didn't finish the thought. Kovac's jaw tightened. He wasn't one to leave his fate in the hands of an unknown entity, no matter how powerful she seemed. "Get me a squad. We're going to the reactor." "General, that's suicide," Monroe protested. "Maybe," Kovac said, grabbing his rifle, "but if we do nothing, this whole station goes up in flames. And if that happens, it won't matter how powerful she is." Inside the reactor chamber, Alice faced the Harbinger, her golden light clashing with the creature's dark energy in bursts of raw power. Her suit was glowing brighter now, the lines along its surface pulsating at a frantic rhythm. But for every strike she landed, the Harbinger seemed to adapt, its form twisting and reforming with new, grotesque shapes. "You're wasting your strength," the Harbinger hissed, its voice a distorted echo that filled the chamber. "You cannot protect them. They are weak. They are unworthy." Alice's eyes burned with fury. "They are more than you could ever understand." She launched another wave of energy, golden tendrils wrapping around the creature's limbs. The Harbinger shrieked as its body convulsed, but then it surged forward, breaking free with a burst of dark energy that sent Alice crashing into the wall. In the corridors, Kovac and his squad moved quickly through the station's winding halls, their weapons at the ready. The sound of alarms and groaning metal followed them as they approached the reactor. "General, are you sure about this?" one of the soldiers asked, his voice tense. "No," Kovac admitted, "but I'm not about to sit back and watch someone else fight my battles for me." As they neared the reactor, a sudden wave of darkness swept through the corridor, extinguishing the lights and plunging them into shadow. The team froze, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. "Movement ahead!" one of the soldiers called out, raising his rifle. Shapes began to emerge from the darkness, twisted, humanoid forms with glowing red eyes. They weren't the androids. They were something else, something far worse. "Open fire!" Kovac ordered. The corridor erupted in gunfire as the soldiers unleashed everything they had. The creatures shrieked and lunged forward, their movements unnatural and erratic. Despite taking direct hits, many of them kept advancing, their bodies regenerating almost instantly. "We're not making a dent," one soldier shouted as he reloaded. Kovac growled in frustration, then activated his comm. "Alice, if you can hear me, we've got a problem out here." Back in the reactor chamber, Alice heard Kovac's voice crackle through the comm system, but her focus remained on the Harbinger. The creature was relentless, its attacks growing stronger and more precise. "They're coming," the Harbinger hissed, its voice dripping with malice. "You cannot stop them. You cannot save them." Alice clenched her fists, the golden energy around her flaring brighter than ever. "I wasn't sent to save everyone," she said coldly, "just enough to make a difference." She extended her arms, and a massive burst of light engulfed the chamber. The Harbinger howled as its form began to break apart, pieces of its dark energy disintegrating in the glow. But Alice staggered, her strength waning. The power she was channeling was taking its toll. "General," she said through the comm, her voice faint, "I can hold it back for a little while longer, but you need to stabilize the reactor. If it goes, we all die." Kovac's voice came through, strained but determined. "We're on it. Just keep that thing off our backs." The race against the clock. Kovac's squad pushed forward, battling the twisted creatures that seemed to multiply with every passing moment. The soldiers fought valiantly, but the losses were mounting. 2 men were already down, dragged into the darkness by clawed hands. Finally, they reached the reactor chamber's outer doors. Kovac slapped a control panel, and the doors hissed open to reveal Alice, standing in the center of a storm of golden energy, facing off against the Harbinger. "Go!" Alice shouted, her voice commanding despite her obvious exhaustion. "Fix the reactor." "I'll keep it contained." Kovac hesitated for only a moment before barking orders to his remaining men. "Secure the room and start the repairs." The soldiers spread out, covering the technicians who raced to the reactor console. Kovac moved to Alice's side, his rifle trained on the Harbinger. "You look like hell," he said, his voice grim. "So do you," she replied without looking at him. The Harbinger snarled, its black eyes locking onto Kovac. "You think she can save you?" It spat. "She is already failing, and when she falls, you will all burn." Kovac tightened his grip on his rifle. "Yeah, let's see about that." The reactor chamber was a battlefield of clashing forces. Alice's radiant energy against the Harbinger's suffocating darkness. Golden light rippled and expanded, slamming into waves of shadow that recoiled like living things. Alice stood in the eye of the storm, her body glowing brighter than ever. Though her movements were slowing, she was faltering. At the reactor console, the technicians worked frantically, their hands moving over controls with desperate precision. "We're losing time," one shouted. "The core is stabilizing too slowly." "We don't have a choice," Kovac growled, standing near Alice. He fired a burst from his rifle at one of the smaller creatures, emerging from the darkness, only to watch the bullets pass through it, uselessly. "Alice, we're sitting ducks here. Can't you take this thing out?" Alice turned her head slightly, her golden eyes burning with barely contained fury. "If I destroy it, the backlash could take this station with it. Do your part, I'll handle mine." The Harbinger twisted and writhed, its body cracking like brittle glass before regenerating again. "You delay the inevitable," it hissed, its voice deep and echoing. "They are already here." Kovac's stomach turned. "What does that mean?" Before Alice could respond, the station shuddered violently. Alarms blared, and the command room's monitors flickered to life, displaying hundreds of new contacts appearing outside the station. "General!" a voice crackled through the comm system. It was one of the officers on the bridge. "We've got a massive fleet of unidentified ships inbound. They're surrounding the station." On the bridge, the Aurora 17's bridge, was chaos. Officers scrambled between consoles as massive alien vessels materialized on the holographic map. Each ship was unlike anything in human records, colossal structures that glimmered with dark energy, their surfaces shifting and pulsating like living organisms. "Sir, they're deploying more Harbingers," an officer yelled. "They're heading for the fleet." The communications officer's voice broke through the din. The other stations are calling for backup. They're already under attack. The captain of the station, a grizzled veteran named Alaric, stared at the displays in stunned silence. "We can't fight that," he muttered. "No one can." Back in the reactor chamber, Kovac's comm crackled, relaying the grim news. "We're outnumbered and outgunned," he muttered, looking at Alice. "If you've got some miracle up your sleeve, now's the time." Alice clenched her fists, golden light rippling around her as the Harbinger advanced again. "Your species loves miracles," she said, her tone biting. "But you'll have to settle for survival." The Harbinger lunged, and Alice met it head-on. The impact sent shockwaves through the chamber, knocking Kovac and the soldiers off their feet. The technicians shielded the reactor console as sparks rained down. Alice's true nature. As the battle raged, cracks began to form along Alice's glowing suit. Pieces of it fell away, revealing something beneath, skin-like in appearance, but marked with intricate alien patterns that pulsed with their own light. Dr. Monroe, crouching behind a console, stared in awe. She's not just enhanced. She's not human at all." "I noticed," Kovac snapped, raising his rifle again as another wave of smaller creatures surged toward them. Alice raised her arms, sending a shockwave of golden energy that obliterated the smaller creatures instantly. The Harbinger shrieked but held its ground, its form warping and splitting into multiple shapes before reforming. "Your kind cannot comprehend what I am," Alice said, her voice echoing with a strange resonance. "I was created to stop this, to stop them." Kovac stepped closer, his voice grim. "And how's that working out so far?" Alice's golden eyes locked onto his, and for the first time he saw something human in her gaze. Frustration. Sorrow. Not well enough. The invasion escalates. The alien fleet began to unleash a barrage of energy blasts at the station. The impact sent tremors through the entire structure, and Kovac's comm erupted with frantic reports. "Shields are failing. We've lost contact with Station Delta. The fleet is breaking apart." Kovac turned to Alice. "We can't hold this place much longer. If you're planning to stop them, it's now or never." Alice hesitated, glancing at the reactor. "If I unleash my full power, the reactor will overload, and this station will be destroyed. Are you prepared for that?" Kovac's jaw tightened. "We'll evacuate who we can. Do what you have to do." A desperate plan. The technicians shouted over the noise. "General, we need at least 5 minutes to stabilize the core. If she overloads it now, we're all dead." Kovac turned to his soldiers. "Get to the escape pods. Evacuate as many as you can. That's an order." "What about you, sir?" one of the soldiers asked. "I'm staying," Kovac said. "Someone has to make sure this works." The final push. Alice stepped forward, her body now radiating so much light that it was difficult to look at her. "This station won't survive," she said, her voice calm and resolute. "But if I stop the Harbinger and its fleet, your species will have a chance." Kovac nodded. "Then let's make it count." She raised her hands, and the energy around her began to coalesce into a blinding sphere. The Harbinger roared, sensing its doom, and lunged at her with all its might. But Alice didn't flinch. As the golden sphere expanded, it consumed everything in its path: the Harbinger, the smaller creatures, and even the walls of the reactor chamber. Kovac shielded his eyes, feeling the immense heat and force of the energy. The last thing he saw before the light consumed him was Alice standing tall, a solitary figure holding back the darkness. When the blinding light finally receded, Aurora 17 was a husk of its former self. The once bustling corridors lay in ruins, charred and twisted. The station's central reactor chamber was unrecognizable, its core dark and lifeless. The air hung heavy with silence, broken only by the faint hum of emergency systems trying to stay online. General Kovac awoke amidst the rubble, his body aching from the sheer force of Alice's power. He coughed, his lungs burning from the smoke and heat. Around him, a few of his soldiers stirred, groaning in pain but alive. "Alice," he murmured, his voice hoarse. He scanned the chamber, but she was nowhere to be seen. The spot where she had made her final stand was now a scorched crater, glowing faintly with residual energy. The Harbinger was gone. "General!" a voice crackled through his comm. It was one of the technicians who had managed to survive. "We're getting reports from the fleet. The alien vessels, they're retreating." Kovac blinked in disbelief. "Retreating? How?" "Whatever she did, it's working," the technician replied. "The Harbingers are falling apart. Their fleet is disintegrating." The fleet's perspective. Outside the station, the remnants of the human fleet floated among the debris of battle. Alien ships were crumbling, their dark, organic surfaces collapsing inward as if devoured by their own energy. The Harbingers aboard those vessels writhed in agony, their forms unraveling like threads pulled from a frayed fabric. The human commanders, battered and bloodied, watched in stunned silence as their enemies vanished. Kovac's search back. In the ruins of Aurora 17, Kovac led his remaining squad through the reactor chamber, his mind racing. He had seen Alice hold back the Harbinger with impossible power. She had spoken of sacrifice, of stopping the invasion at any cost. But was she truly gone? "Spread out," he ordered his team. "If there's anything left of her, we're going to find it." The soldiers moved through the wreckage, calling out occasionally, but finding nothing. Kovac himself stepped toward the crater, the faint glow of golden light still emanating from its center. As he approached, the light began to pulse faintly, growing stronger with each step he took. Finally, in the center of the crater, he saw it. A small, glowing fragment of Alice's suit, pulsating softly like a heartbeat. "What is that?" one of the soldiers asked, peering over Kovac's shoulder. Kovac knelt and picked up the fragment. The moment it touched his hand, a surge of warmth spread through his body, accompanied by a whisper in his mind. "Your fight isn't over." He froze, his eyes widening. "Alice." The light in the fragment flickered, as though struggling to stay alive. "She's still here," he muttered. A new threat looms. As the remaining survivors regrouped and the fleet began recovery efforts, reports started pouring in from other sectors. The alien fleet might have retreated, but strange signals were being detected across the galaxy, pulses of energy similar to the Harbinger's arrival. Kovac stood on the bridge of a battered rescue frigate, the fragment of Alice's suit clutched tightly in his hand. "We won this round," he said, his voice grim. "But they'll be back." Dr. Monroe, who had survived and now stood beside him, nodded. "And when they do, we'll need her." Kovac glanced at the fragment, feeling the faint pulse of Alice's energy. "She's not gone," he said firmly. "Not completely. If we can figure out how to bring her back." Monroe raised an eyebrow. "That's a big if, General." Kovac smirked faintly. "Since when did humanity ever let the odds stop us?" The legacy of Alice. As the fleet limped back to safety, Kovac couldn't shake the image of Alice standing against the Harbinger, a lone light in the darkness. She had given them a chance, a slim one, but a chance nonetheless. In the quiet of the ship's cabin, he stared out at the stars, the fragment still glowing faintly on the table beside him. Somewhere out there, he thought, the fight was far from over, and Alice, in whatever form she had become, would be part of it. For now, humanity had survived, but survival was only the beginning.